Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to have this opportunity to address the Oslo Freedom Forum. And let me start by thanking the Human Rights Foundation for creating this arena. We are proud to have an international conference of this format here in Oslo. The protection of human rights is the responsibility of all states. Yet, human rights are under pressures in all regions across the globe. And some governments choose to work actively to undermine them. In Russia, the Caucasus, and parts of Eastern Europe, the political space for civil society is shrinking. We see states using so-called traditional values to relativize human rights. In Africa and the Middle East, sexual minorities are under attack because of who they are. LGBTI persons face death penalty in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Yemen, Mauritania, and parts of Nigeria and Somalia. In some Latin American countries, civil and political rights have been violated for decades. We see frequent reporting of killings of journalists in countries such as Mexico and Honduras. In the Middle East, religious minorities are suffering violence and discrimination for what they believe. These are just some examples, and all of them totally unacceptable. Human rights are not cultural values imposed by the West on the rest of the world. Human rights are a universal commitment to human dignity. It is against this backdrop that the Norwegian government is working now on a white paper to Parliament on human rights, the first one on this topic for 15 years in Norway. We need to do more to narrow the gap between norms and realities. And we have a strong civil society in Norway and a healthy national debate on a range of human rights issues. We need to strengthen our efforts to protect human rights, and the valuable input and sometimes criticism from civil society improves our human rights policy. Ladies and gentlemen, individual freedom is at the heart of any society that safeguards human rights. And the freedom to choose one's government is the cornerstone of democracy. I would like to talk about three aspects of freedom and human rights that are fundamental to democratic societies. And I want to share some reflections on what is needed to strengthen our efforts. The first is freedom of expression and free media. Freedom of expression is a fundamental right in itself. And it's also crucial in order to safeguard all other human rights. A free press is essential in any democracy. We regret the increased pressure on freedom of expression, and we are repelled by the targeted surveillance that journalists and political activists experience. The fact is that over the past 10 years, there has been an increase in violence against journalists. Today, 95% of those responsible for killing journalists are still free. 95%. And we know that for every journalist killed, many more are silenced. Therefore, promoting freedom of expression and independent media is an urgent and long-term priority. Support of independent media is more important than ever before. The second aspect of a free and democratic society is the rule of law. One of the great challenges to human rights is the absence of rule and law and an independent legal system. Lord Acton, the English politician and writer, was onto something when he warned us more than 100 years ago. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Freedom and human rights depends on the separation of powers. In this regard, we are concerned by trends we are seeing also on our own continent. Corruption and impunity are on the rise. There are serious shortcomings in the legal system in many countries. We must work to strengthen rule of law, not least through technical cooperation, to build capacity and to strengthen the system. The third aspect that I would like to address is the respect by the majority for the rights of the minorities. The best test of real freedom in a country is the degree of security enjoyed by minorities. We know that in times of political, economic, and social upheaval, minorities are at particular risks. Minorities, religious minorities, racial minorities, sexual minorities, indigenous peoples, women, they are not asking for special treatment. They are asking that their human rights are respected as for everybody else. And today they are not, and therefore special attention is needed from us. Human rights defenders, you are at the forefront of the fight. Human rights defenders play a crucial role in promoting all human rights: civil, political, economic, social, and cultural. But the situation for human rights defenders is deteriorating in a number of countries. Many of you know this from your own personal experience. To promote human rights, the most important thing we can do is to support and protect human rights defenders. When human rights defenders are silenced, human rights are challenged. And in a number of authoritarian regimes, human rights defenders are threatened and stigmatized, subject to violence, illusionary legal processes, arbitrary detentions, torture, and sometimes even murder. Many of the speakers here at the Oslo Freedom Forum have told strong personal stories about how authorities have tried to silence them and their friends. We need to defend those who bravely stand up to protect human rights. We must show that the world is watching. We advocate the importance of protection of human rights defenders in the UN. We support the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders. We support individuals, organizations, and networks that are promoting human rights for all. We support security training and capacity building, but I think we can do more, and we must do more. Ladies and gentlemen, the fundamentals for protecting and promoting human rights are largely in place today. However, the gap between commitments on one hand and the reality on the ground on the other hand is unacceptable. And I think it is important that we recognize that the international system to promote and protect the human rights are not equipped to address all these challenges fully and adequately. In the UN, states with bad human rights records are actively working to undermine human rights, and they are building alliances among themselves. This threatens human rights and also confidence in the UN. And the answer is not to cave in. The answer to me is to respond forcefully. I believe it is even more important, please. I believe it is even more important that we who believe in human rights are active, committed, and visible within the system, and that we actively advocate the right of civil society to be heard in these forums. To promote human rights, we must work multilaterally in the UN, and we must work to strengthen the system. We must work regionally through the Council of Europe and support similar institutions in other regions of the world. We must work bilaterally, address issues, share concerns, and build alliances across geographies. The most rewarding and perhaps important part of my job is to meet human rights defenders. Sometimes part of the importance is that it is visible for authoritarian regimes that we meet. Other times, I'm asked not to talk about the meetings because it would increase risks for the brave people who share their stories. The meetings are valuable because it gives insight and inspiration to continue also our efforts. Your strong voices and bravery makes a powerful impression. Thank you for your attention.